I want to tell you about a really important moment in Kirby Smart's coaching career. He was in his upper 20s, his late 20s, and he had just been hired as the one of the coaches and assistant coach at LSU. This is an LSU team that was Nick Saban's last one. He announced before the Capital One Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, at the end of the 2004 season that he was going to become the coach for the Miami Dolphins. LSU lost on the last play of the game in that game to Iowa, 56-yard touchdown that is still relatively famous. And, what happened that year was, Kirby had already kind of he had been at Georgia as a grad assistant. He had been at Florida State as a grad assistant. LSU was his first job. It was his first job as a collegiate coach, getting paid. Again, he had been at Georgia, then Valdosta, and then Florida State. He was the defensive back, one of the defensive backs coach at LSU with Derek Dooley, Will Muschamp. I think Jimbo was on that staff. Nick Saban, obviously the head coach, was a really good staff at LSU. This is an LSU team that the previous year had won the national championship in 2003 and had been really good in 02 and 01 as well. They won the league in 01. And, but again, this was Kirby's first season there, and he got on with a really good staff. This was the same LSU team that got blistered in Athens 45-16. I don't know if you remember that. That was really the only time Nick got blown out that I can recall at LSU. And this is what Kirby said Monday. He said, he said, I coached at LSU. He said, a guy once told me, he said, that office you're in, that's not your office. You're borrowing it. And he went on to say, I knew right then that if you didn't win, you wouldn't be there long. All of these coaches are borrowing their offices, period. That's what's happening right now in college football. They're borrowing offices. And the important part of that is as follows. Very few people in coaching are like Kirby Smart at Georgia. And Kirby's borrowing that job too. Okay? That he's borrowing that office. I have been covering Georgia for this is the 25th season. I've seen in that time 2 head coaches, which is extremely rare in football. I have seen countless basketball coaches, Herrick, Dennis, Mark Fox, who was replaced by guy with the glasses, and now Mike White. So about every 5 years you get a new basketball coach. The most important thing to remember is that, and I think the people that I know that are in coaching understand that they're only going to be where they're at for a limited amount of time. Most people are not Vince Dooley or Bear Bryant. I mean, those guys were at their, Vince was at Georgia for 25 years and then stayed as the athletic director. That is not at all common. Most of the things that have happened at Georgia over the last half century are not common at all. It could speak to some degree to Georgia's sort of a dereliction on Georgia's part of not getting new, fresh faces in there. But at the same time, there's been a lot of consistency over the years. You have people like Manny Diaz, Yoklin. I mean, there's Bowerly. There's been a lot of national championship winners because the right coaches were hired in the early 80s or, soon thereafter. Andy Landers didn't win the national championship, but they were very good for a long, long time. Kirby knows. And if you're in coaching or you want to be in coaching or whatever, and you don't understand this, the uniform, the helmet, the school colors, the passion, that belongs to the fans. That belongs to the alums. That belongs to the people who are completely invested every single way in, the crazy talk, the message board world, Twitterverse, Instagram, TikTok, all that, so-called crazy. That is what's paying all these salaries. That's what's paying everything to happen. That Kirby understands that, I think, is a real. He's 2 decades into this now. This is I think his 21st or 22nd season of coaching, period. And he was at the Dolphins for a little bit, but other than that, he's been in collegiate coaching at Alabama, Georgia for the vast majority of the time, and there's always times when you're on the hot seat of sorts. That always happens. I mean, do you remember after the Alabama game what it was like this year? And if Georgia were to lose to Florida or Texas or Tech or State or whoever, And there's always a seat that can get warm or hot. But the fact is that someone one day will replace Kirby. He is not going to be the head coach at Georgia forever. Dabo, who has been as good at Clemson as anyone, frankly, could possibly be. He's been about as good as you could be there. He's not going to be there forever. And none of these coaches are. That time, if it even existed, has come and gone. And here's the other thing that was asked of Kirby. I think it was on Monday, but I think Mike Griffin asked about the midseason firings, and Kirby said, "It's the world we live in. Everybody's got a voice. Everybody listens to somebody." And then he said, he went on to say, "I think there's so much built around the playoffs. Everything's boom or bust. You can't have a normal season. People have to make decisions earlier based on how somebody does, and I don't know enough about talking about LSU. I know it's high expectations." Well, I can tell you how we got here if you'll give me a second. We started getting here in 1984 when Georgia, Penn State, and Oklahoma sued for their television rights to be unrestricted by the NCAA. And for this last 40 years has been a slow boil to where we're at right now. I was talking to one assistant in the league the other day in the Southeastern Conference, and he said, our football program is the front door to our university. Bingo, right there. And that's why things are happening quicker. There has never been a time in collegiate athletics where a sport has been more important to the universities than college football is to the universities right now, period. I would bet you right now that the percentage of applications to Mississippi is up way more right now than the percentage of applications are up at Clemson. Why? I mean, you can do the math. Clemson's not playing on national television. Ole Miss is. And it's directly tied to not just the leagues they're playing in, but who's winning and who isn't. And it can't be ignored. It cannot be ignored. And I'll put this anecdote out there too. Again, I've mentioned this many times. Penn State is spending almost $750 million on their football stadium, on Beaver Stadium. They basically are ripping it down and building it as they go. All right, so sort of like they're doing in Jacksonville, except they're doing it to where Penn State can still play there. $750 million on an athletic facility. Think about that. Georgia's budget is over $1 billion for the year, the university's budget. So they're taking almost that and rebuilding the football stadium with it. Like, think about all the jobs. Think about all the students at the University of Georgia. Penn State is spending, it's not that much, not quite, but it's just an absurd amount of money. So they feel like it's worth it. So to fire James Franklin, who failed up there, I have no problem saying that. I don't see how you could see us say, fail is a harsh word, but I don't know what else are we talking about here? To spend $50 million to help you properly set the direction of a program that you're spending $750 million on is chump change. Complete chump change. It's nothing. It was the right call. So James Franklin, Billy Napier, Clark Lee, Brent Key, Brian, I've forgotten his name already at LSU. Billy Napier, Mike Norvell, Lane, Kirby, whoever. They're just renting these positions. It really is I was on the board of trustees where I went to undergrad. Okay. And that's the group that has to set the best, course for the institution. It's not the football coach. The football coach is renting it. And the football coach is very important, actually. Most people, who is the governor of Alabama? If you know that person's name, congratulations, you are in the minority. Do you know who the head coach at Alabama is? How about this? Who's the governor in Tennessee? Do you know Tennessee's head coach? How about In Texas, what's the Texas governor's name? Do you know the Texas football coach's first and last name? I do. I know who Kay Ivey is at Alabama, but most people don't. I think people know who Brian Kemp is, but not nationally. They would. Kirby Smart's far more visible and popular, for lack of a better term, than Brian Kemp, because Brian Kemp's not on television 10 times a year going to 100 million people. It's big business. Big business. And for a long time, people like me made money off of it, and the kids didn't benefit. Well, they are now. Okay, they didn't benefit monetarily. So there was some, for those of us who do what I do too, it's not that we're not working, but there was, that wasn't completely on the up and up in many ways either. But I couldn't control that. Well, everybody's getting paid now. So we're at where we're at with this thing. And I think that, the short answer is money, but the short answer to a lot of things in life is money. And please, in the comments section, you can go sort of, on the sideways about that, but that's the way a lot of things are. A lot of things are, what is the value of it? Does it bring me value? I think that you understand that if you're a head coach and you understand, I'm not going to be here forever. I have to go win. Here's the quote again. He said, I knew right then, if you didn't win, you wouldn't be there long. He wasn't there long, Kirby, as it turns out. And it wasn't because LSU didn't win. It was because Nick moved to Miami, and then soon thereafter was in Alabama, where they had won 7-6 season, and pretty much from that point forward, were competing for the national championship. Georgia's had an 8-5 season, and I mean, unless something goes haywire this season, they're basically going to be competing for the national championship every season. Perhaps with 2020, you could say they weren't. Generally speaking, they've been competing for the national championship the whole time. It is one of the most important things one of the most valuable things you can learn early in your life. I can say that I know what it was like at 28. I mean, it's not easy being 28, being new at something, having, I started Dawg Post when I was 23, basically. And that was a different time. That was a different era of .com world. I mean, it's not at all corporate like it is now, or, controlled by venture capital money. And, or maybe it was venture money, but not corporate. So, but it was a different time and a different space. But when you're 23 years old, you don't know much. When you're 28, you know something, but you don't know so much. But that right there, you're borrowing it. That office you're in is not your office. You're borrowing it. Most people actually are in that position. Most people, if you're a teacher, you're borrowing your classroom. Those kids aren't your kids. You have to teach them. You can say my kids, but they go home to someone else. Or if you're a physician or if you're a nurse, God bless you. You're at the hospital. It's not your room. And that right there, that can be one of the hardest things to understand. And the thing about all these schools is when people go there or they graduate there or they have been fans for however long, that is their school. That doesn't change. And that's the part, they're not borrowing their emotion. They're not borrowing their time. When my in-laws, get in their tractors and go up to Clemson to watch games, that's real. They're not borrowing that. That's where that is the difference, is that the fans own it. When the coach is fired, like LSU bro, that was LSU bro embarrassed Saturday night. That man, Cajun woman, whatever, they are still LSU people right now. And in the time, that I've done this, you go to the SEC basketball tournament, and that's like the weirdest, Star Wars bar scene of the SEC experience. Baseball is a little bit like that too, but in basketball, no one's got the same following Kentucky does. And so everybody's just kind of behaving themselves for the most part, but they're still fans, even when their basketball team sucked or sucks. Carolina fans still go. not many of them, and they don't see Carolina win much, but you get my point. And they can't divorce from their emotion. They can't divorce from what they did when they were watching games on their dad or their grandfather's lap or their grandmother's lap. It is their right to be that fandom. Is their curse in many ways. Coaches don't get that. They don't, it was I mean, and this, everything I'm saying about Mark Richt, I'm about to say about Kirby too. Kirby, I think, is a little bit different though. But Mark Richt, as integrated as he was at Georgia, and as much as he did for Georgia, I mean, Mark lives in 5 Points. I'm not going to give you the location, but Mark is still in town. But it never was his. And I think Kirby understands that. As much as he's tied in, this guy who was an all-SEC performer, I think second team, he was always all academic and all this stuff, and as he's won 2 national championships and all this stuff, people will come for him. I'll leave it this way. I did in 2006, I did a sit-down interview with Ray Goff after a basketball game. Went over to his house, talked to him for a long time. And, Mark had just won the SEC championship in 2005. And this is about, Kirby and I were about the same age. We were in upper 20s. And it was hard for me to understand or even get through my skull that Mark Richt would ever be in trouble at Georgia. He just won the SEC championship twice in a 3-year period, okay? Twice in a 4-year period, whatever it was, 02, 3, 4, 5, okay? And Ray just, I don't think he was in a rocking chair, but he may as well have been. And these were all off the record things. And Ray just said, it's always out there. He will always get pressured. He will eventually leave. And that's just what and he wasn't saying that. Ray wasn't saying that because of his experience. Ray Goff could not have been a more I put it this way, accepting, humbled person about his experience as the head coach at Georgia. And people think he failed all the time. He didn't fail all the time. They had 2 really good teams with him in 91, 92 for sure. Those were really good teams. His 95 team got sidetracked with injuries for sure, with Robert and Mike Bobo getting hurt, Robert specifically. And Mike too. But Ray knew something I did not at the time. That was my, you're borrowing it moment. Ray Goff, this is a guy who was the quarterback of an SEC championship team. He was an assistant coach on SEC championship teams. The guy was a quarterback this was like Aaron Murray. Aaron never won the league. Bad example. Jake Fromm, whatever. He knew, but he had been through it. And I think that's one of the most valuable things that the fans are the ones that are the true, trustees, for lack of a better term, of things. That doesn't always go well, but it is always true. And I think for Kirby to learn that early enough in his career, and I think most coaches learn it around that time, you're not going to be there anywhere for very long. And, that Kirby has been at Georgia for 10 full seasons, that's a long time. Most situations are not like Georgia in terms of coaches staying and being there for a long decades. That is not common. What is far more common is 5 to 7 years and you're out. And the question becomes now moving forward, will that 5 to 7 be more like 3 to 5? Brian Kelly, it was 3 to 5, and but it was time. It was time. Thanks for watching.